Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at today's webinar from the Food Processing Suppliers Association, Food Safety Execution and Your Bottom Line. My name's Chuck Senna. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Axis Automation, and I am also a proud member and one of the committee leads for the FPSA Food Safety Network. Before we dive into the webinar, I do want to say a few words about the FPSA Food Safety Network. This is a group within the association that strives to promote food safety throughout all food processing industries. And if you're interested in joining the network, please go to fpsa.org/networks to join it today. And if you have any questions about our network or the other FPSA networks, please reach out to FPSA's Elena Sierra. You can reach her at esierra@fpsa.org. That's ESIERRA@fpsa.org. This afternoon, our presenter is Randy Kohal. He is the Vice President of Food Safety and Reliability at Cleans, or Cleanse as some of his customers call it. Randy has been in the food industry for over 40 years in serving in a variety of food and beverage manufacturing plants. Prior to joining Cleans, he was the corporate food safety and sanitation director with Rich Products. He is certified in internal auditing and hygienic design. He is also a preventive controls qualified individual and a certified food industry professional. We'll get right to it, and Randy, in just a few minutes, we'll have you take it away. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them into the chat window. If there's something that is interject and ask Randy for a clarification. Otherwise, we'll plan on holding the questions until the end of his presentation. All right, and with that, Randy, it's all over to you.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that introduction, and thank you to the FPSA for having me today, and as well as all you participants for joining us for the next few minutes as we talk about food safety, execution, and your bottom line. Next. Thank you. So we're going to cover a variety of topics today that will talk about both food safety execution, how they impact your bottom line. And the first of those that we're going to look at is what exactly is food safety? Next. Basically, it's everything that affects or intends to affect the product. Now, there are 5 key principles of food hygiene, and it's whether you're working in a food manufacturing plant or cooking at home, these apply to you as well. First of all, you want to prevent contaminating food with pathogens spreading from people, pets, and pests. You want to separate raw and cooked foods to prevent contaminating the cooked foods. And in many of our manufacturing plants that you've been in, you may have seen where there are different colored smocks. There are physical separations between those 2 areas to help ensure that there is no cross-contamination. Cooked foods should be cooked for the appropriate length of time and at the appropriate temperature to kill pathogens. Keep in mind, once again, if you're cooking at home, that kill step is on you. Also, we want to store food at the proper temperature and always use safe water and safe raw materials. I'm sure that you have an approved vendor list for all of your ingredients and raw materials that come into your plant to make your products. There are certificates of quality that are listed to make sure that the attributes and everything is correct. So always make sure that you're checking that. Now, your food safety team, your QA teams have probably conducted risk assessments at your facility. to create a HACCP plan or a HARP-C plan. And you've probably conducted many inspections, implemented a lot of corrective actions, and changed processes to close the gap in your food safety and sanitation programs. It's an ongoing process. We're going to talk a little bit later about how to tackle all that and how to execute it, because it can seem like a very insurmountable task. You've probably done some self-audits, maybe even done some swabathons to make sure that you've effectively managed the risk and you avoid that dreaded four-letter word in the food industry, recall. Now, the past year has challenged everyone to determine how to produce safe product in an associate safe environment. Next. We just talked about that insurmountable task. It goes back to, how do I eat an elephant? And the answer to that is, of course, one bite at a time. Why do you have a food safety program? There's really one basic reason for that, and that's to prevent foodborne pathogen, foodborne illness in your consumers. And there's a lot of moving pieces to the program, and each has its place and purpose. If you take a look at the areas listed on this slide, ask yourself, what do you have in place to ensure efficient and effective execution and documentation? Is it a method or a system that's designed especially for that purpose, or are you attempting to just make something work? Does your method catch any deficiencies or notify when something isn't compliant? Any number of actions can sidetrack the focus of the food safety and sanitation programs. Obviously, in the last year, dealing with COVID-19 has been probably high on that list, and it isn't gone. I still have contact with folks that are dealing with those situations in their plants right now. Labor resource shortages. Once again, with the impact of the pandemic and what's happened over the past year, it's created a very difficult situation from a hiring standpoint. Resources might not be available. And then the economic impact as well. The shutdowns that have occurred at many plants, to some running excessive overtime. And so all of these have to be taken into consideration in terms of being able to keep everything on track. And when something seems out of control, it's definitely time to reassess to make sure that the food safety program is not one of them. So we're going to talk about the bottom line and how food safety impacts that. Obviously, businesses are in business to make money, and it's all about the bottom line. The decisions that get made are based on one of three things. How is this going to increase my sales? How is it going to decrease my cost? Or how is it going to mitigate risk? And while I can't necessarily help you with the increasing the sales part today, I think I can help with the decreasing cost and the mitigating risk. So we're going to take a look at some things as to how that can happen. It's evident right now that many food manufacturers are still struggling, run into some folks that are still uncertain if they're going to remain viable, still trying to recover from the pandemic. And hard decisions have to be made to help secure the future. But the question you need to ask yourself is, are any of those decisions adversely affecting your food safety program? It's been said that there's only one thing worse than producing no product, and that's producing bad product. And whether that's from a quality standpoint or a food safety risk perspective, both would be a bad decision. Now, if you're in a mid or upper level leadership position, I want to ask you a question. What kept you awake more last year? The thought of your employees contracting COVID-19 or producing bad product? And what did you do to protect against both? My experience has taught me that standardization is a key element to eliminating variation. planning, not hoping, executing that plan, not expecting things to just happen on their own, and then documenting the results with analysis to ensure continuous improvement. Being proactive beats being reactive. Now, there are some misconceptions when we talk about food safety. It's not just about cleaning, but obviously cleaning is a very important part of that. And in some situations, sanitation is just usually told how much time they get to clean and sanitize rather than a validated process that dictates the need. Now, there may be some ways to reduce that time, whether it's through automation, resources, or process improvement, but we often run into situations where production takes priority. We've got to have product for the customer, and so sanitation comes up on the short end of the stick. And then there are corners that get cut, processes that don't get completely followed, and the results can be detrimental. We assume that our higher ups always understand everything. That's why they're in the position they are. But actually, truth be told, C-suite leaders, they're not always aware of the what and how of food safety. They rely on others to manage those processes. And if they're not getting any news, they assume that's good news. And when it comes to documenting, why not just do it once in one place and have that information available for reporting and for analysis time over time, and have the transparency for everybody to be able to view what's needed from their perspective. One other thing about documentation for food safety and sanitation is that those are living documents. They need to be reviewed periodically, at least annually, or when a known change occurs. Another misconception is that, it's sanitation's problem. Now, having come out of sanitation, I can say that, I fought those battles firsthand in the plant. And unfortunately, sometimes it was sanitation's fault. But as far as overall food safety goes, it's not just sanitation's problem, it's everybody's job. And when you take a look around your company, your organization, ask the question, do we just have a food safety program, or do we have a food safety culture? A food safety culture reinforces the actions necessary to do the right thing and for it to be the way that business is done. It requires that message to come from the top down, and it's reflected by the actions of leaders and associates at every level, so that good manufacturing practices become normal manufacturing practices. You can't say this is how we've always done it, because that certainly doesn't make it right, and it won't guarantee a successful future. Situation I am very familiar with involved cleaning of some horizontal mixers in a bakery. It was just common practice that the associates did it their way. When QA came around to do the pre-op inspections and to perform the ATP swabs, they knew that they were going to have to swab once, and that first swab was 99.9% probably going to be a failure, and they'd have to ask sanitation to re-clean. They might have to go through that process several times. And everybody was happy with that being the normal. But when I addressed the situation and I said, this is not acceptable, we have to improve, we first took a look at the tools that the associates were using. First of all, they were cleaning in an area that was not well lit. They didn't have flashlights. They didn't have proper illumination of the equipment that they were cleaning. So how could they be expected to have it cleaned properly? Once we gave them the proper lighting and then looked at the process to be able to improve upon the tools and the methods that they were using to clean that particular piece of equipment, it got to the point where when pre-op came, the failed swab was the exception rather than the rule. And we always have to make sure that we are measuring. I like to keep score. I'm a competitive person. When I go do something, I want to know how I'm comparing to how I did previously so that I can improve. And we have to have that capability within our processes and our systems and our plants as well. Peter Drucker, one of the favorite quotes I like of his is that what gets measured gets improved. So if your data collection, we all collect data, a lot of it, but if it just gets stored away in a sterile 3-ring binder or the darkness of a file cabinet drawer, it doesn't give you the full potential for driving improvement. Sometimes that information, that data doesn't become useful information. It just becomes hopefully a good answer to a question on an audit, but it's not doing anything to help drive you forward. You know, many companies today are involved in digitalization projects to eliminate paper, and that's a good move. It's a smart move. However, if the digitalization doesn't provide analysis, it isn't beneficial for improving anything except maybe the amount of paper you save. And you want to have transparency. You've got different groups within the plant that all have their agendas, but they all have to contribute to the overall food safety success. And you want to have transparency. And so a system that can do that is vital to success. Now, the other thing is planning. Back in my early days, I'd shared this with Chuck, I think, early in one of our conversations. I told him early on as a young quality manager, when I was getting ready for an audit, I pretty much crossed my fingers and I hoped that we passed. But over time, I came to learn that was not the key for success. And so there was a lot of planning that was required to be done in order to make that happen. And there's a lot of components that make up the food safety program, and all are very important aspects of it. But when you look at that pie and you look at how large of a piece of it is sanitation, execution, and documentation, because there are so many actions that take place, whether on a daily or a weekly basis, that are essential for getting a plant back ready for food safe production, you have to realize that it takes up a lot of your resources. And so as a result, it also takes a lot of planning. So knowing what needs to be cleaned, when, and what resources are going to be required are part of the equation that go into that successful execution of sanitation. It's really a juggling act. So you've got production, and I'm just going to take this time and say, yes, I know it's production that makes the money. I've been on both sides of that coin, and I've been on the overhead side, and so I know who it is that's making the money in the plant. But it's still a juggling act between production, maintenance, and weather. Yeah, weather plays a part as well if you're trying to get things done and you have some outside work. And then the labor resources that make completing the tasks on time a challenge for even the most seasoned of leaders. And it also requires communication and coordination of actions. One of the things that I did in plant was to actually have a meeting several days before the weekend. I worked in a frozen bakery, and so we did the majority of our cleaning on the weekend when the lines went down. And so we had to coordinate with, first of all, when are the lines going down, because it wasn't always a Monday through Friday operation. So we'd have to have the scheduler and the operations manager involved in the conversations, because they may had to have made a decision to run over if they didn't meet their production requirements. Then we had to coordinate with the maintenance team to find out what projects, work orders that they had slated to get completed, whether they had any contractors coming in, and that was always going to be on first shift, because contractors weren't going to come in on third, that's for sure. But we had to determine which day, which shift, what line and what area of that line was going to be free for us all to be able to complete the things that we needed to do. Now, when it comes to planning also, you have to make sure that you are preparing for those infrequent tasks like periodic infrastructure cleaning or periodic equipment cleaning that are going to require more time and possibly more resources once again to complete. It's always good to take a look at your periodic infrastructure cleaning as kind of a barometer of your resource capability. Because if you think about it this way, when the lines go down and they're getting ready to be cleaned to come back up for production, you know you're going to get all the food contact surfaces, you're going to get the adjacent zone 2 surfaces. But what about those outlying areas, those zone 3s, the overhead wall, ceilings, pipes, the walls, drains, things that are not directly in contact necessarily with the food contact surfaces? Those are going to get let go if you don't have enough resources. And so if you take a look over time, if you're not at least bouncing back to make sure they get done at some reasonable interval, it might mean that you're not giving the amount of time, or you don't have enough resources to be able to complete that. And eventually it could turn into an issue for not getting other cleaning done as well. It's kind of like your environmental monitoring program. You know, listeria is out there. It's out there somewhere. You just need to know where it is. As long as it's in your zone 4s or zone 3s, you can manage it, and it's not a big problem. But once you start seeing it creep into your zone 2s, it's not far before it's going to start affecting your product as well. So it's really all about getting on the same page when the communication is done. That cleaning process should be a validated process that includes the right chemistry and application. Now, if you choose to do foaming, then obviously you need to have a chemical that's designed to be dispensed through a foamer. And the training we'll talk about a little later also on how to properly apply that foam. There's 4 basic components of cleaning, and that's time, temperature, concentration, and mechanical action. And they can be shifted, but none of them can be eliminated. So if I increase my temperature, I might be able to reduce my time. If I increase my mechanical action, I might be able to reduce my time. I'm not all about adding more on the chemistry side, because more is not better in that case, but definitely having the proper concentration. So how do you verify your processes? Is it simply visual? Do you use ATP? Do you rely on your environmental monitoring program, or do you have some other method? Now, we could also do a whole webinar on hygienic design. But I'm just going to take a little bit of time here to talk about how it impacts the cleaning process and some things that are applicable to it. First of all, a simple definition of hygienic design means easily cleanable. If you can't see it, if you can't reach it, you can't sample it, it's not hygienically designed. And this applies both to equipment and to your facility. In 1972, the definition of clean, according to the American Meat Institute, was simply freedom from all foreign materials such as meat scraps, fat, dust, blood, manure, and cleaning compounds. Kind of changed their tune a little bit in 2002 when the definition included being cleanable to a microbial level. Big difference. Now, when we talk about hygienic design, there are many different standards and principles available to look at. You've got the European Hygienic Engineering and Design Group, known as EHEDG. You've got 3A, that's well known in the dairy and pharmaceutical circles. You've got the NSF, the National Sanitation Foundation. You've got the CBA, the Consumer Brands Association, formerly known as the GMA, the Grocery Manufacturers Association. You've got the ANSI Z50.2, which is applicable to bakery. And you've got the American Meat Institute. So some of these are definitely industry related, but the important thing's not to argue about the standards, but to pick one and follow it. And regardless of what you follow, it's an investment that will pay a high return. If you renovate or replace a piece of equipment, you should conduct an audit. Use a checklist to see if that new piece of equipment or the changes or corrections that are going to be made are going to meet the hygienic design standard or principles that you choose to follow. And as I said, there's a number of them out there, but I want to share just a few principles in case you're not real familiar with hygienic design. The American Meat Institute has 10 principles of hygienic design. The first one, as we just mentioned, is to be able to clean to a microbial level. Secondly, to have it made of compatible materials. To have it accessible for inspection, maintenance, cleaning, and sanitation. To have no liquid collection. That the equipment's designed to eliminate or minimize hollow areas. To have no niches. To make it sanitary operationally. For hygienic design of maintenance enclosures. Hygienic compatibility with other systems. And that it has a validated cleaning and sanitizing protocol. Now, the question becomes, what's this going to cost me? How's this going to affect my bottom line? And the answer to that question is that in most cases, there is probably going to be additional cost involved for having a manufacturer build in the hygienic design requirements that you would look for. That is a fact. But here's the payoff. It's going to make that piece of equipment easily cleanable. It's going to reduce the possibility of having any foodborne pathogen issues that are going to lead to that dreaded 4-letter word, recall. So it's an investment more than a cost. So let's talk about resources and managing those resources. We talked earlier about possibly having a shortage of resources available in the workforce. So if you are lucky enough to have bodies at least, what do you do with them? Well, hopefully you train them. Working third shift and weekends isn't going to attract a large group of associates, but you need to invest in who you have to ensure that they are properly trained and equipped for success. What does that training involve? Well, first of all, associate safety. If somebody has not been in the food industry or been in manufacturing and you're bringing them in to where there's big, heavy pieces of equipment with moving parts, you want to ensure that they understand what they need to do to go home at the end of the day with all the fingers and toes they arrived with. You want to teach them about chemistry. You want to teach them not to put certain things together that are going to cause them harm, like chlorine and acid. Adding to that associate safety, of course, is the lockout tagout. You can tell them to stop a piece of equipment, but if they don't know all of the points that need to be locked out, then it's not going to be beneficial for them. You need to train them on how to do what they're going to do. An SSOP should not be just a couple of points, but needs to make sure that it includes who, when, what, how, and be very detailed about it. Obviously, following the 7 steps of wet or dry sanitation. Don't take the mindset that I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. Rather, you should say, I'm going to make who I have the very best they can be. People don't stay in sanitation very long unless they have a passion for it. You're faced with turnover, and there's a lot of expense that goes into that training. But think of it this way. You've probably seen the meme. You got 2 people standing there having a conversation with each other, and one says to the other, "What if we train them and they leave?" And the other one scratches his head and goes, "What if we don't and they stay?" So training is very critical to having a successful food safety and sanitation program. It's going to affect your bottom line. It's going to make it a requirement for an investment, but hopefully you'll have the return of having food safe equipment. A lot of scheduling goes into that as well. As I mentioned, making sure that you have the right people in the right place at the right time in order to accommodate the proper cleaning. Another thing about execution requirements is that it takes somewhat of being a project manager. Did a presentation one time early in my career where I used the little video of a comedian trying to keep all the plates spinning. And that's really what it looks like from a food safety and sanitation perspective as well. And making sure that everything is getting done the way it should be. So a project manager or a project management requires the ability to systematically and efficiently coordinate a wide range of tasks to meet a common goal. And you might look at it once again as the elephant in the room and how am I going to eat it? Because you say there's never enough time to do a big project, but there's always time to do some smaller ones. And so if you just take a chunk of it, work on it, start with one area, one line, and work at it from that perspective. There's 4 keys to successful project management. Communicate effectively, organize and juggle, keeping all those plates spinning, solve problems and make decisions. You can't be wishy-washy. Now, I used to say about myself, I was seldom right, never indecisive. I hope my track record actually spoke better than that. But you have to be someone who's willing to make a decision to move things forward, and then build good teams, because you can't do it by yourself. You want to find synergies. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't waste time trying to reinvent the wheel. When it comes to audits, find ways that you can look for the overlapping tendencies to get everything complete for multiple audit requirements. Look for ways to ensure that your documentation and processes are compliant for each. We talked earlier about all that data that we collect, wanting to make sure that it doesn't get locked away in 3-ring binders and manila folders and file cabinets, never to see the light of day. All that data you're collecting should be telling you something. How is it improving efficiency? Am I efficiently and effectively managing my resources? Because you can't ask for more help if you can't show that you're effectively and efficiently utilizing the resources that you currently have. And it's not always about reducing headcount. It's just about being properly staffed. And is the data that you're collecting helping you mitigate risk? You can conduct inspections, you can do audits, you can generate corrective actions to try to close the gaps. But if you're finding that you're having repeats on these issues, maybe you haven't gotten to the root cause. And so you need to do some root cause analysis to help eliminate, to put a permanent fix in place so that you're not chasing those same issues audit after audit, inspection after inspection. One way to improve your processes is to incorporate technology. Now, I told you I came out of a frozen bakery, and blowing air was considered cleaning. And so it looked like you were in one of the western states out there during dust season, and you couldn't see from one end of the plant to the other. Really, all it was doing was relocating soil from one surface to another, moving the pathogens around and the potential risk of pests as well. So we improved upon that process. And there's a lot of different options out there. You know, you wouldn't think of running a food plant without an X-ray or a metal detector. You just wouldn't think about that. So in order to help our processes along, maybe we on the sanitation side need to add some assisted cleaning systems. We talked earlier about the 4 requirements of the cleaning process, and we talked about labor resource issues. So maybe what we do to increase the efficiency and bridge the gap on some of the lack of bodies that we have is to implement an assisted cleaning system. Maybe an automated belt washer, an automated COP tank to put in sensors to help us track things, or RFID. Those are some of the things that technology can help us do. The thing about it is that technology is a tool, and it's going to not be a magic wand that eliminates the need for the basics to be in place. The people that you do have, you have to train. You have to clean. You definitely need to monitor, set some goals. Do you have KPIs? What are you measuring? Is it beneficial for you and for your industry? Your bottom line relies on these 3 key elements of food safety. And it's important to be proactive, not reactive. There's many different technologies available. It is just a tool, and it's important to use the right tool for the right job. The things that you see listed there as far as cost effective, scalable, ease of use are all very important, but I think the most important one is that it's the right tool for the job. You can find a partner who understands your industry. One of those such partners is the Cleans team. Been innovating in the food industry since 1983 and have decades of experience in the food and beverage industry with leadership roles, award-winning solutions, and the only complete food safety and sanitation management tool set. I trust that you have found this time to be valuable and have learned something. If there are any questions that you do have that you might think of after today's meeting, you could reach out to us and we'll be able to help answer those questions for you. I appreciate your time today. Chuck, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Randy. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your time with us today. A couple of follow-up questions to some of the themes that you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the culture of food safety, I guess data isn't just for geeks anymore, is it?
It's not.
Yeah, it's could you elaborate a little bit more about how some of the different departments can use the data that they're collecting about their processes and their effectiveness to make a business case to maybe make some change, or to get more time to do the cleaning, or to make some of those arguments? Do you have some examples you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. One that comes to mind, Chuck, is the quality department. Say they're the team that's responsible for doing your pre-op inspections, and they're the gatekeepers of the results of those pre-op inspections. And so if they're just checking a box that says on this line, on this piece of equipment, we had a non-conformance today, that piece of paper gets filed away, and there's no tracking, there's no trending of what may be the cause of that issue, or if they recognize over time that maybe this particular piece of equipment routinely has a failure. So then we start connecting the dots. Is it the same person that's cleaning this particular piece of equipment every time? Does that person have the proper training? Do they have the right tools? Do they have the right amount of time? And I'm going to go back to it because, as I mentioned in our previous conversation, hygienic design is a passion of mine. Is this piece of equipment hygienically designed? Is it built to enable the associates to properly clean it, to avoid having those niche areas that are resulting in some of the non-conformances? But if I am not sharing the information across departments, then I may not know all of the things that go into what's causing some of the failures. On the same side, if I don't communicate with the sanitation team, maybe they were short-staffed and didn't get to do the proper cleaning on this piece of equipment. So that communication between departments is very critical. Once again, I want to go back to the QA team. If they're running their environmentals and they're continuously finding hot spots in certain areas, if they are not communicating either to maintenance or to sanitation as to what might be driving those, or operationally, it doesn't help get to the real fix of the issue.
Okay. Uh, on something that's kind of related to that too is you talked a little bit about documentation as well.
Mm-hmm.
As the government inspectors are starting to come out of COVID hibernation, we're hearing stories that the frequency of audits is increasing, both by government agencies and by third-party auditing groups like SQF. What are some of the things that having the systemic approach can do to help you make those audits go smoothly?
Well, once again, it boils down to my experience, and obviously planning, knowing the documentation that needs to be completed, and then ensuring that it is completed with all the I's dotted and T's crossed. What has a tendency to happen is that you're going to find out that maybe somebody didn't sign their paperwork. Maybe somebody didn't put the reason why they didn't finish everything. There may be some chemical information that got left off of a particular document. And when you're working with paper, there's only one way to ensure that that gets overcome, is with very meticulous review of all that paperwork. If you have a digital system that has built-in safeguards to help ensure that you have all of those attributes of information and documentation complete, that system then helps become your safeguard when it comes to auditing. Having all the information in one place, having it in real time, having the level of granularity to be able to answer the auditor's question without showing your whole hand, right? Because we all know, we've sat through audits. What do you do when an auditor asks a question? Answer the question, nothing more.
Very good. Well, another question that's come in has to do with, what's what's the best way to go about some of this? It seems like many companies are out there. Um, Everybody's offering a software component to their product or service. Is there a way that you can tie things together, or what's a good approach to making sure that you're gathering the information you need to gather and making sure it plays nice with the other data sets?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chuck. So first of all, we talked about using the right tool for the job. There are many offerings out there that are either a component of something or a module of something, but they're not specifically designed to meet the needs of the food, beverage, and pharma industries. And so you want to ensure that from that auditing standpoint, you've got that built into the system. You want to make sure that it has interface capability. We talked about technology, so whether that's being able to monitor sensors, whether that is to interface with another system, maybe like a CIP system, to help gather data, to do trending and tracking. Any type of a system out there that might be able to draw all of that information into one place, giving you that audit ready capability, is something that you would want to look for.
All right. I know that there are several equipment manufacturers on the call here, and one thing that frequently comes up when equipment manufacturers get together is every company does their own risk assessment. What is a reasonable or a practical set of information I can give them to help them identify their risks and develop good food safety practices?
Well, that's going to be somewhat industry specific, and taking some of the practices and guidelines of hygienic design will certainly be a good start, both from the equipment manufacturer and the manufacturer side as well, the food manufacturer side, so that we talked about, not getting in too big of an argument of what standard you're going to follow or what principles you're going to put into place, but it's simply, what issues have you had before? You're already conducting a hazard analysis, preventive controls process to put in place. So how is the equipment that you're buying going to help support all of those things that you're trying to achieve in that regard?
Very good. Well, I haven't seen any questions come in. I think we're at a point where we can start to wrap up. I do want to thank Randy and
Chuck,
everybody at Cleans. Yes?
Chuck, there did one question come in. One question that came in was, could you speak to the differences between how equipment is certified for food safety versus how it is used? They gave an example, ball valves are certified by 3A for COP only after every product run. But he's only seen plants take the ball valves out every week, which leaves an interesting looking, smelling slime inside the ball cavities, even with cavity fillers. I don't know if I got that question correctly or fully, but if you could speak to that question.
Yeah, so Lynn, I'm not sure I understand what was the actual question. They talked about certifying ball valves like from 3A.
Yeah, the question was, could you speak to the differences between how equipment is certified for food safety versus how it is used?
Okay, well, I understand now where you're going with that. So it may be certified as hygienically designed or easily cleanable, but that doesn't necessarily tell you the frequency at which it needs to be cleaned. And that would be based on your industry, your frequency of production, and it would certainly take into account if you're seeing some issues with cleaning at a particular interval, you may need to increase the frequency to avoid any issues. Doesn't mean that the equipment is not easily cleanable. You still have to set the frequency, and that's where your risk assessment comes into play. Do some swabs, do some environmental ATP swabs, do some environmental swabs to see when you start getting a microbial build that's going to require you to set a cleaning frequency in place.
All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that, Randy. Again, I'm not seeing any additional questions on my screen here. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
I want to remind folks that this session today was brought to you by the Food Safety Network of the Food Processing Suppliers Association. You can connect with us online at www.psa.org. And there's a host of really industries there, both equipment manufacturers and food producers. The F has done a nice job of building up an excellent reference library. So when you have questions, I encourage you to make the F website kind of top shop, help you find solutions to the problems that you're having. With that, thank you everybody for attending today. And this webinar, Elena, it has been recorded, and if you want to share it with somebody in the future, a link will be provided for that, correct?
Correct. It'll be posted on the FPSA website at fpsa.org.
Very good. Well, that wraps things up from our end. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully it's not snowing where you are like it is in Wisconsin.
Thank you.